Second part. Greylancer left the tavern and headed directly for Chief Lonzy's heirs. His intention was to depart immediately. He could give a damn about the collective hatred of the villagers. He had little interest in humanity to begin with. He was merely dispatching his duties as frontier overlord. And the truth was, he could barely tolerate speaking to humans. The overlordship was not determined by succession. Before being appointed to this position by the Privy Council, the highest decision-making body of the nobility, Greylancer had been a member of the sub-council, and all but assured a seat in the next privy. The ladder up the ranks was a precarious one for which pedigree, skill, and proven record were requisite criteria. It was a great achievement for a noble to earn a seat on the sub-council, much less the Privy Council. Yet Greylancer had easily ascended the elite ranks virtually uncontested. The noble Greylancer. Though the nobility had dispensed with such honorifics, his brethren naturally took to calling him by this appellation, out of deference for his record, for wiping out those among the nobility opposed to the sacred ancestor. In the noble year 2004, the true nobility world faction, which advocated the extermination of the human race, plotted to disperse a radioactive substance that selectively acted upon human DNA. It was the young warrior Greylancer that had killed every last one of the conspirators, and foiled their plot on the eve of the operation. And in the noble year 3052, the Anti-Human Alliance, a larger and more powerful offshoot of the true nobility world faction, set in motion a 1,000-year conspiracy to assassinate the sacred ancestor. 200 years later, it was also Greylancer who exposed the plot within weeks and, risking his own ruin, drove a stake into the heart of the ringleader, a high-ranking member of the Privy Council. And then again in the noble year 3071, when humanity mounted an insurrection for the ages against the nobility, leading the charge to put down the threat and punishing the regional nobles, and that incited the uprising was none other than Greylancer. Why this greater noble, embodying the full glory of the noble race, was demoted to oversee a sector of the frontier was a mystery even to the Privy Council, handing down the order. Nevertheless, Greylancer accepted the appointment without complaint, and departed the capital with his most trusted retainers in tow. Nearly 10,000 nobles were said to have lined the street to soberly see off their exalted warrior. And though he ruled over his subjects with both a gentle and severe hand, his disinterest in humans was not caused so much by this tavern incident alone, as it was by Greylancer's nature. Simply put, humanity's existence was beyond his comprehension. To most nobles, humans were not much more than semi-precious vermin allowed to live only for the warm blood coursing through their veins. True to legend, though a wound from an iron arrow was not fatal, it was capable of burning and rotting the immortal flesh, causing infernal pain. Such was the awesome will of the greater noble to endure for this long without batting an eye. He was already inside the stable. In a separate stall apart from Chief Lonzy's wagon and cybernetic horse were 2 tethered horses. One mount had only the burden of its master's garments. Greylancer rose to his feet and staggered 2 steps in that direction, before losing his balance again and toppling over. The anger swelling on his face conveyed a shame for which not even death could atone. Lurching like a boulder with arms and legs, Greylancer brought himself up on one knee, and then he heard a gasp from outside the door, the patter of footsteps, and then a pale hand rested on his shoulder. "Were you watching, woman?" Neither an expression of gratitude nor joy, the noble's words were imbued with a ghastly chill. She seemed to tense for a moment and then quickly replied, "Yes, I was." The determination in her voice shook his look of menace. "Let me help you." Are you the chief's wife? Mitya, yes. Do not meddle where you do not belong. Yes, I know. But this is an expression of my appreciation. Appreciation? Greylancer's neck made a grinding sound as he twisted it in the woman's direction. What are you talking about? Come inside the house, if you care to know. No, he growled. Move over there. His eyes gestured toward the pile of calorie weeds before him. The color and shape of an ordinary haystack, it was actually synthetic grass. The primary energy source for cybernetic horses. Lying down on one knee, he labored to his feet. The pit of his stomach burned like fire. He shrugged off the woman's hand, sending her reeling several steps back, but she managed to keep her footing and returned to Greylancer's side, undeterred. Again her arm wrapped around his. No longer trying to break her hold, Greylancer lumbered forward and slumped against the pile of calorie weeds. Crushed under the weight of the giant, the haystack crackled like a mound of tiny crushed bones and compressed under him into a thick bed. Mitya repositioned him, threw open his cape, and found the wound on his stomach. A black stain seeped through his green and gold embroidered shirt and spread downward. Mitya nodded. Stay here, she said and stood up. Wait, how did you know that I would return here? You were not outside. I've been waiting here in the stable, knowing you. I expected you would come directly here without saying a goodbye. Knowing me. Yes, my lord. Nodding kindly, she twirled around and hastened at the door. Within 10 minutes, she returned with a white med case hanging from her shoulder. Human medicine was useless in treating vampiric injuries. Mitya hoisted the case, nonetheless, and revealed a false bottom. Greylancer's eyes glimmered at the sight of the item she produced from the case. The red plastic packets were dehydrated blood. Were they discovered, the entire family would surely be crucified as servants of the nobility. Even more astounding were the plastic vials stored in a cryogenic agent. When Mitya removed the lid from one of the vials pluming white smoke, a sweet bouquet crept into the noble's nasal cavity. What is? My blood, your lordship. If we ever had occasion to meet, I wanted you to have a taste. You've been collecting blood. Greylancer regarded the chief's winsome wife, as if he were looking at an unfamiliar creature. Yes, it's true that human blood is the best elixir for healing my wounds, but if anyone should find this, I would be torn to pieces, yes. No matter, I've cut my own wrists and collected the blood you see here, and another cache that I've collected over 17 years is in a freezer in the basement. But why? What appreciation do you owe me? In due time, Mitya said. Please drink first. Handing him the vial, she turned her back and waited. I am healed. When Mitya turned around, the vampire's mouth was painted crimson, a line of blood streaking from one edge of his lips and dripping off his chin. She averted her eyes before Greylancer wiped the blood of the back of a hand. The blood is good, but I have no memory of the taste. If you did, I imagine I would be your servant instead of wedded to another. I don't understand. 17 years ago. 17 years ago, perhaps the years mean nothing to you. Perhaps the years mean nothing to you. I was 15 years old. One summer day, my school had planned a field trip by steam bus. Mitya took the unfinished vials from Greylancer's hand and returned them to the case. Her distant look seemed to reflect the sweetness of the memory. Buoyed by good weather and the steady performance of the bus, the class ventured twice as far as they planned to go to the western forest. She began picking flowers and gathering various edible plants, and by the time she looked up, darkness had already unfurled in the western sky. The teacher's chaperone turned pale. After boarding the students onto the bus and departing back to the village, he realized he'd left one girl behind. That girl was me. When I realized that I had strayed from the group, I found myself in an old, magnificent abandoned graveyard, a thoroughly devastated ruin. Gravestones were overturned, the names engraved on them were scraped off and unreadable. The earth had been torched with gasoline. It must have been a nobility graveyard destroyed back in the days of the human uprisings. Only the doors of the tombs were untouched by the devastation. A most ominous and beautiful graveyard. I understand now the entire property had been proportionally designed to appear aesthetically pleasing, but at the time, I simply could not tear myself away from the wicked beauty of the place. And then she came to another realization. Her classmates were long gone, and she was utterly surrounded by darkness. Terror embraced her entire being. When she started running in the direction of the bus, Mitya heard the sound of stone grinding against stone behind her. She did not need to turn around to recognize that the tomb door had opened, or that something had risen from the tomb and was now lurking behind her. The putrid odor of soil assaulted her nostrils, penetrating her consciousness until she grew lightheaded. She collapsed into his cold embrace. A voice whispered in her ear, so very warm and delicious. Second part end.